Hi, I'm Reverend Jake Sabe, and welcome to Children's Bible Stories. Alright children, for our Bible story for today we're going to do the story of the Annunciation of the birth of John the Baptist. So our story begins in the days of King Herod, the king of Judea. And there was a priest named Zechariah. And it was his turn to go into the temple to stand before the altar of the Lord and to offer up sacrifices to God. Now, the Bible doesn't say it exactly, but church tradition teaches that this was taking place in the Holy of Holies. Do you children remember what the Holies of Holies is?
It's the part of the temple where the ark lives.
Yeah, so in the Temple of Solomon, or in this case, this was the temple built by Ezra, and then there's the second temple, you had the outer courts where the women and the Gentiles were allowed, then the inner courts where the men were allowed, and then you had the holy place where the priests could go. Then there was the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place, and that's where God's presence resided in the Ark of the Covenant. And the only person who was allowed to go into the Holy of Holies was the high priest on the Day of Atonement. And because Zechariah was inside and everybody was outside waiting, the church has historically believed that this was the Holy of Holies and that Zechariah was serving as high priest that year. Because we know throughout the rest of the Gospels that the priests were taking it in turns at this time to serve as the high priest of that year. And so Zechariah was the high priest that year, and he went into the Holy of Holies. And while he was standing in there, all of a sudden, who appeared to him?
An angel.
Any particular angel?
Yes. Gabriel.
Yeah, the angel Gabriel appeared. So the angel appeared, and Zechariah, of course, was startled. Was an angel. And the angel said, "Do not be afraid, for your prayer is heard. You and your wife Elizabeth will have a son, and you shall call him John." Now, Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth, like Abraham and Sarah in the Old Testament, were really old. And they had no children. And they were so old that they couldn't have children anymore. But the angel promised that this would happen. But Zechariah, he said, How is this possible? I'm an old man and my wife, she is advanced in ages as well. We can't have children. And then the angel said, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and he has sent me to speak to you and bring you these glad tidings. But behold, because you have doubted, you shall become mute, and you shall not be able to speak until these things have taken place. And with that, Gabriel disappeared. And now the other priests were waiting outside for Zechariah, and he came wandering out of the temple, but he couldn't speak. And he made signs at them, so he tried to use his hands to try and explain what happened, and they realized that he must have seen some vision or angel or something while he was in the temple. And so, after that, Zechariah finished up his service in the temple, and then he went home, and his wife Elizabeth got pregnant with John the Baptist. And now there's one other important piece of this story that is important, because Children, on what day of the year do we celebrate Christmas?
The 25th of December.
Now, we don't know exactly what day Jesus was born on because Scripture does not say. Now, there are some silly unbelievers that think that Christians only celebrate Christmas on the 25th because we are copying the Romans, either the winter solstice or the feast of Saturnalia. However, neither of those feasts takes place on December 25th. And actually, the feast of December 25th goes back to the early church, and the reasons why the early Christians celebrated Christmas on December 25th had to do with this story of Zechariah. Because do you remember what day I said it was that Zechariah was in the temple? The day of
Atonement.
Yes, and we know roughly what day the Day of Atonement was. And so if we had Zechariah serving in the temple on the Day of Atonement, then going home, assuming that his wife Elizabeth got pregnant straight away, then we count 9 months later to June 26th, which is then the birthday of John the Baptist. And, as we're going to learn in our next story, John is 6 months older than Jesus. So 6 months after June 25th, 26th is December 25th. And so the reason why the Christians celebrate Christmas on December 25th has got nothing to do with pagan holidays, but it happens to do with the Jewish feast of the Day of Atonement. So we don't know exactly if Jesus was born on December 25th, but if we assume that Zechariah had his vision on the Day of Atonement, went home, and Elizabeth got pregnant straight away, then we go 9 months after that, gets us to June 26th, and then we go 6 months later, we get to December 25th, then that is why we celebrate Christmas on December 25th. So there you go, children. There's a little church history reason for you as well for why we celebrate Christmas on Christmas. And that's our Bible story for today, children. I've been your host, Reverend Jake Zabel. Goodbye, and God bless.